The notification came at 11:47 p.m. I was already in bed. We had ended things 3 hours earlier, not dramatically, not with screaming or broken dishes. Just a conversation that had been coming for months, finally arriving. We were done. I had accepted it. I was exhausted in the particular way that endings exhaust you. Not from fighting, but from finally stopping. I thought the hardest part was over. Then my phone lit up. A bank alert. Our joint account. Withdrawal. $120,000. I stared at that number for a long time. Long enough for my eyes to adjust to the brightness of the screen in the dark room. Long enough to read it 4 times. Long enough to understand that what I was looking at was not a mistake, not a glitch, not something that would resolve itself if I refreshed the app. Then I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I put the phone down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the city was doing what cities do at midnight. Indifferent. Continuous. Unbothered by what had just happened in one dark bedroom in one apartment among millions. I didn't sleep. Her name was Rachel. We had been together for 6 years, the kind of relationship that becomes infrastructure, shared lease, shared calendar, shared language for things that only made sense to us, shared plans for what came next. We had opened the joint account 3 years in, when we started talking seriously about buying a property together. The conversation had been careful and deliberate. We were both cautious people, both savers, both aware that combining finances was a form of trust that deserved to be taken seriously. We set terms. We agreed on contribution amounts. We shook hands over dinner like we were signing a treaty. Every month after that, we both contributed. Every month, the number grew. We talked about it sometimes, what it meant, what it was becoming. Rachel used to say it was proof that we were building something real, that it wasn't just words or feelings but actual concrete evidence of a shared future. $120,000 was 4 years of that proof. 4 years of discipline and patience and saying no to things we wanted individually so we could say yes to something together. Rachel knew that. She had been there for every transfer, every conversation, every quiet Saturday morning when we'd check the balance together over coffee and feel something that I can only describe as the particular satisfaction of a plan working. Which is why what she did at 11:47 p.m. was not impulsive. It was not grief. It was not panic. It was not someone acting out of pain in a moment they would later regret. It was planned. I found out later, much later through the legal process, that she had been preparing for weeks. She had opened a personal account at a different bank 10 days before our conversation. She had verified the transfer limits. She had called her bank to confirm that a wire of that size could be processed immediately, even after business hours, even late at night. She had timed it. She waited until we officially ended things, until the words had been said and I had walked to the other room, and she had gathered her overnight bag and left. And then, somewhere between our apartment and wherever she went that night, she opened her phone and moved every dollar. Not because she needed it. Rachel had her own income, a good salary, her own savings, financial stability that had nothing to do with what we had built together. She was not desperate. She was not scared. She took the money because she believed she could, because she calculated. In those weeks of quiet preparation, in those days of smiling across the dinner table while a transfer was already scheduled, that I would be too devastated to respond, too heartbroken, too exhausted by the end of 6 years to have anything left for a fight. She had known me for 6 years. She thought she knew exactly how much I had left. She was wrong. I called my lawyer at 8 a.m. the next morning. Not a friend, not my parents, not anyone who would tell me to take a breath or give it time or think about whether this was really worth the energy. My lawyer. The first thing she told me was to gather everything. Every contribution record, every bank statement, every transfer confirmation going back to the day we opened the account. I had all of it. I am meticulous about financial records in a way that Rachel always found excessive. Spreadsheets, folders, monthly summaries. She used to tease me about it. She wasn't laughing now. The second thing my lawyer told me was that joint account law is complicated. It varies by state, it depends on how the account was structured, it depends on documentation and intent, and a dozen other variables that most people don't think about until they need to. But unilateral withdrawal of funds from a shared account, particularly funds accumulated over years for a documented joint purpose, was actionable, especially if we could demonstrate my contributions clearly, and especially, my lawyer's voice changed slightly here, became more precise, especially if we could demonstrate her intent. Intent. That word became the center of everything. Because Rachel had made a mistake that careful people never make. She had texted me about the account. Not after the withdrawal. Before it. Months before, in ordinary conversations about the property we were planning, about timelines and neighborhoods and what we could afford. She had used specific language, our savings, what we've built, the plan, when we're ready to move on this. In writing, on her phone, sent to mine, time-stamped and preserved. She had documented her own understanding of what that money was. She had documented her own intent. And then she took it anyway. The legal process took 8 months. I will not pretend it was clean or simple or that I moved through it with composure and purpose every single day. Some days I did. Some days I sat in my car in a parking lot and felt the specific exhaustion of carrying 2 griefs at once. The grief of a relationship ending and the grief of realizing the person you had loved was capable of this, and I wondered if it was worth continuing. It always was. But some days I had to remind myself of that. My lawyer kept me focused. So did the spreadsheets. We went through mediation in month 6. Rachel arrived with her own attorney and a version of events that I barely recognized. In her telling, the money was hers. A repayment of contributions I hadn't made. Compensation for sacrifices I hadn't acknowledged. A settling of a score that existed only in her account of our relationship. I had the bank records. I had the texts. I had 4 years of monthly transfers with my name on them. Mediation concluded without resolution. We went further. The final settlement came in month 8. I recovered the full amount, every dollar, plus legal costs. Rachel paid it from the personal account she'd opened 10 days before our breakup. The account she had opened while we were still having Saturday morning coffee and checking the balance together. Here is what happened to Rachel in the year that followed. She had told people, mutual friends, her family, colleagues she had confided in, that our split had been mutual and clean, that we had divided things fairly, that there was no conflict, no ugliness, no reason for anyone to ask further questions. When the legal outcome became known, that story fell apart. People who had taken her version at face value stopped taking it. Mutual friends made quiet decisions about who they stayed close to. Not dramatically, not with confrontations, but in the way that trust, once broken, simply doesn't reassemble. Invitations that had included her name started arriving without it. Conversations she had expected to be part of happened without her. Her professional reputation, in an industry where people talk, began carrying a question mark she couldn't remove. She moved cities 14 months after the settlement. I heard this through someone we had both known, mentioned in passing, not as news but as information. I don't spend time thinking about her life now. What I know is that she made a precise, calculated decision at 11:47 p.m. on the worst night of my life, and she made it on a foundation of assumptions about who I was and what I would do. She assumed heartbreak makes people passive. She assumed grief makes people give up. She assumed that 6 years of knowing someone means you know what they're capable of. She was wrong about all of it. I want to tell you something about that night, after the notification, after the unanswered calls, after I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling in the dark. I felt a lot of things. Betrayal so complete it had a physical weight. Disbelief that kept cycling back into certainty and then back into disbelief again. A kind of grief that was different from the grief of the breakup. Sharper, colder, more clarifying. But underneath all of it, something I didn't expect. Stillness. Because in that moment, with that notification on my screen, every lingering question I had about ending the relationship disappeared. Every, maybe I'm wrong and maybe we could have tried harder and maybe I'm making a mistake, gone, answered, resolved. She had given me something, in her greed, that 6 months of conversation hadn't. Certainty. The money came back. The certainty was free. And Rachel spent weeks planning an exit that assumed I was already defeated. She forgot that the people who build spreadsheets at midnight are exactly the people you don't want to underestimate. Karma didn't arrive with drama or noise or a satisfying confrontation. It arrived quietly, in the form of 8 months of paperwork. And it was, as always, thorough.